The HOA president called the cops on me for trespassing in my own backyard. And honestly, that would have been funny if 3 patrol cars had not come rolling on my driveway like I was running a meth lab behind the hydrangeas. She stood there in her cream-colored designer suit, smiling beside her silver Mercedes, absolutely certain she had just ruined my Saturday morning. What she did not know was that I was not just some tired old homeowner with dirt on his knees. I was a retired county magistrate. And for the past 5 months, I've been quietly building the kind of paper trail that turns powerful people into defendants. My name is Nathaniel Brooks, though most people in Briar Glen used to just call me Nate. And when I bought that house outside Willow Creek, Georgia, I was not looking for a war. I was 61, newly widowed, still waking up some mornings reaching for a woman who was no longer there. And I needed a place where the evenings were quiet, the trees were tall, and nobody asked me how I was doing unless they actually meant it. The house had a wide backyard that backed up to a strip of pine trees, and I remember standing there on closing day thinking, this is where I will build my little workshop, nothing fancy, just a place for sawdust, coffee, old blues music, and maybe a version of myself that did not feel so hollow. For the first 2 weeks, Briar Glen looked like a postcard. Kids rode bikes in lazy circles, sprinklers clicked in the afternoon heat, and neighbors waved with that polite southern rhythm that says we may not know you yet, but we are deciding whether we like you. Then I met Marjorie Vale. Marjorie had been HOA president for 9 years, which in suburban politics is basically a monarchy with better landscaping. She was 52, always polished, always perfumed, always dressed like she was about to sell a mansion or foreclose on your soul. Her smile never reached her eyes, and every sentence came wrapped in sugar, which is how you knew there was poison inside. She called me darling the first time she found me. My mailbox had been knocked crooked during a storm, so I replaced it with the exact same model, same black post, same brass numbers, same little red flag that squeaked when you lifted it. 3 days later, a certified letter landed on my porch accusing me of unauthorized exterior alteration. $200 plus $25 a day until corrected. I read it twice, then laughed so hard I almost dropped my coffee. Then I did what 30 years in court had trained me to do. I stopped laughing and started documenting. I pulled the Briar Glen covenants, read every page, and found not one word about mailbox replacement approval. Then I walked the neighborhood and photographed 27 mailboxes that looked just like mine, several newer, several crooked enough to qualify as abstract sculpture, and not one had a violation sticker. That was the first little crack in Marjorie's kingdom. The second came from a man named Caleb Ortiz, who lived 2 doors down and ran a plumbing business out of a battered blue truck. He saw me taking pictures and said, "Let me guess, Queen Marjorie found you." Then he told me about the fines, the threats, the neighbors who paid because fighting was more expensive than surrendering. Mrs. Lillian Price, a retired librarian on Hawthorne Lane, had been fined for a bird bath. A young couple named Devin and Alicia Reed had been ordered to repaint their shutters 3 times in 1 year. And every complaint had the same smell to it. Not community standards, not property values, but control. Marjorie did not want order. She wanted obedience. And the funny thing about people like that is they always think silence means victory. They never consider that silence might mean someone is taking notes. The first real mistake Marjorie made was underestimating how patient grief can make a man. After my wife passed, I got used to long, quiet nights, the kind where you sit alone with your thoughts and learn how to observe instead of react. So while Marjorie kept escalating, throwing violation notices at my front door like confetti at a parade, I just kept collecting evidence. Every letter went into a binder. Every interaction got time-stamped. Every conversation got backed up to cloud storage so secure it probably qualified as federal infrastructure. And the more I watched Briar Glen, the uglier things started to look. The neighborhood pool had cracked tiles and broken lights, even though residents paid almost $300,000 a year in HOA fees. The clubhouse roof leaked during rainstorms. The landscaping company somehow charged luxury resort prices while trimming bushes that looked like they had lost the will to live. One night, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, cold coffee, and 6 months of public financial records spread out like evidence in a homicide case. And suddenly it hit me. Oakline Property Solutions. That name appeared everywhere. Landscaping contracts, maintenance work, holiday decorating, pressure washing, irrigation repair. Nearly half the HOA budget disappeared into that one company. So I ran the business registration through an old courthouse contact of mine, and there it was. Owner, Gregory Vale, Marjorie's younger brother. I leaned back in my chair and just stared at the ceiling for a while, because once you see corruption clearly, you cannot unsee it. It changes the temperature of everything around you. Suddenly the fake smiles make sense, the intimidation tactics make sense, the selective enforcement makes sense. They were not protecting the neighborhood. They were bleeding it dry. Around that same time, I submitted a formal request to install a cedar privacy fence along the back portion of my property where I planned to build my workshop. I filed the paperwork properly, paid the absurd application fee, attached survey maps, contractor specs, color samples. Everything short of my blood type. 30 days passed with no answer. Then 40. Then 52. Silence. And silence, in HOA language, usually means they are waiting for you to give up. But I did not. I hired a licensed surveyor named Ron Whitaker, an old Marine with sunburned cheeks and the personality of a bulldozer. He spent an entire Friday marking my property lines with bright orange flags while muttering things like, if these idiots argue with GPS coordinates, they ought to be studied by science. Saturday morning, I started digging post holes myself. It felt good, honestly. Sweat running down my back, Georgia heat wrapping around everything like a wet blanket, classic rock playing low from the garage speaker. For the first time in months, my mind was quiet. Then I heard tires crunch gravel. I looked up and saw that silver Mercedes crawling around the corner, slow as a shark circling blood. Marjorie stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses and that same frozen smile she always wore when she thought she was about to ruin somebody's day. Well now, she said, walking across my lawn without hesitation, this is disappointing. I wiped dirt off my hands and said, morning to you too. She ignored that. You are building on community easement property. You need to stop immediately. I handed her the survey packet. Every measurement is certified, I said calmly. Fence line sits entirely inside my property boundary. She glanced at the papers for maybe 2 seconds before lowering them like they physically offended her. I do not care what some survey says, darling. The HOA decides what happens here. That sentence right there told me everything I needed to know about Marjorie Vale. People like her eventually stop pretending rules matter. They start believing they are the rules. I pulled out my phone and started recording quietly. Marjorie noticed immediately. Oh, are we documenting now? She asked with a tight smile. Absolutely, I said. Her jaw twitched. Then she walked 10 feet away and called the police. Loudly, dramatically, like she wanted the whole neighborhood listening. Yes, officer, there's a man trespassing on HOA property and becoming aggressive with residents. Aggressive? I was holding a fence post. Caleb had wandered over by then carrying a cup of coffee, and I swear the man almost spit it across the lawn, trying not to laugh. 20 minutes later, 2 sheriff deputies rolled into my driveway. One of them, Deputy Harris, paused halfway out of the cruiser when he recognized me. Judge Brooks, he said, blinking. Well, this is awkward. The color drained out of Marjorie's face so fast it looked medically concerning. But instead of backing down like a sane person, she doubled down. I do not care who he is, she snapped. He's violating HOA code and threatening community property. Deputy Harris reviewed the survey documents, permits, county maps, everything. Then he looked at Marjorie with the exhausted expression of a man reconsidering every career decision he had ever made. Ma'am, he said carefully This gentleman is fully within his rights. In fact, technically you're trespassing right now. I have never seen someone try so hard to hold on to dignity while losing it in real time. Marjorie adjusted her sunglasses even though the sun had gone behind a cloud. This is not over. She hissed at me quietly as the deputies walked away. Oh, I know, I said. And for the first time since moving to Briar Glen, her confidence flickered. Just for a second. But I saw it. That same week, the retaliation started hard. Violations for my garbage cans being visible for 20 extra minutes. Violations for leaving a ladder in my garage with the door open. Violations for an unauthorized seasonal wreath on my front door even though it was October and half the neighborhood looked like a pumpkin patch exploded. Then came the anonymous complaints. Noise complaints when I was asleep. Claims I was threatening residents. Social media posts warning people about dangerous new homeowners disrupting the community. One evening Caleb came over carrying beer and said quietly, "She's scared of you." I looked at him and laughed. "No," I said, taking a long sip, "she's scared of discovery. There's a difference." That night, I sat alone in my unfinished workshop frame, breathing in the smell of cedar and fresh dirt, while cicadas screamed in the trees. And I realized something I probably should have understood earlier. This was never about rules. Rules were just a costume. What Marjorie really loved was power, the feeling that she could make people small whenever she wanted. But power gets sloppy when it panics. And over the next few weeks, Marjorie Vale was about to panic harder than anyone I had ever seen in a courtroom. About 3 weeks after the police showed up at my house, the entire thing finally cracked open. And honestly, it happened faster than even I expected. See, corrupt people usually survive because everybody around them stays isolated, embarrassed, exhausted, scared of becoming the next target. But once people realize they are not alone, fear starts changing shape. It turns into anger. Then anger turns into momentum. And momentum is dangerous when you've built your little empire on intimidation. Caleb organized the first neighborhood meeting in his backyard on a humid Thursday evening. Folding chairs scattered across the grass. Citronella candles smoking against mosquitoes. People standing around holding paper plates and nervous expressions like they were attending some underground resistance meeting instead of a suburban cookout. 23 residents showed up. By the end of the night, almost every one of them had a story. Mrs. Price broke down, crying halfway, through describing how Marjorie threatened foreclosure over unpaid fines tied to her birdbath violations. Devin Reed admitted he and his wife had considered moving because they felt constantly watched. Another resident, a widower named Frank Delaney, revealed he had been pressured into using Marjorie's brother's contracting company for repairs at nearly triple the normal price. That was the moment the room changed. You could actually feel it. People stopped whispering. They started comparing notes. And once all the pieces hit the table together, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The next morning, I handed everything over to Assistant District Attorney Rachel Mercer, an old colleague of mine with a smile sharp enough to cut sheet metal. Rachel reviewed the financial records in complete silence for nearly 40 minutes before finally leaning back in her chair and saying, "Nate, this isn't just HOA fraud anymore. This is organized embezzlement." After that, things moved like wildfire through dry grass. Subpoenas went out. Bank records got pulled. Contracts got audited. Turns out Oakline Property Solutions had billed the HOA for landscaping projects that never happened, maintenance crews that never existed, and emergency repairs scheduled on days when half the county was underwater during flood. One invoice claimed they repaired storm damage to the clubhouse roof 3 months before the storm actually happened. That detail alone made Rachel laugh, so hard she nearly spilled coffee across her desk. Meanwhile, Marjorie completely unraveled. She started posting bizarre late-night rants online about enemies infiltrating Briar Glen. She accused residents of conspiracy, claimed county officials were targeting successful women, even tried to argue that I was using judicial hypnosis to manipulate the community against her, which honestly sounded less like a legal defense and more like somebody mixing Chardonnay with prescription medication. Then came the annual HOA meeting. God, I still remember walking into that clubhouse. Every seat filled, people standing against walls, local reporters near the back, camera lights glowing, the air buzzing with the kind of tension you normally only feel before a jury delivers a verdict. Marjorie sat at the front table wearing a cream blazer and enough makeup to battle exhaustion, but her hands kept trembling against the microphone. I did not think she realized yet that it was already over. Caleb opened the meeting by introducing a resident recall motion signed by nearly 80% of the neighborhood. Audible gasps rippled across the room. Then Rachel Mercer stood up from the back row and calmly announced that Briar Glen HOA was officially under criminal investigation for financial fraud, wire fraud, falsification of records, and embezzlement. Silence. Real silence. The kind that presses against your ears. Marjorie stood up so fast her chair tipped backward onto the floor. "This is harassment," she shouted, pointing directly at me. "This man manipulated all of you. He's obsessed with destroying me." I remember looking at her for a long moment before answering quietly, "No, Marjorie, you did that yourself." And something about hearing the truth spoken out loud finally broke her composure completely. She started yelling at residents, accusing neighbors of betrayal, blaming everyone except herself. At one point, she actually screamed, "You people would still be nothing without me." And that right there, that was the end. Because once people hear how someone truly sees them, there's no going back after that. Deputies enter the clubhouse maybe 10 minutes later. Calm, professional, almost gentle. But when they walked toward Marjorie with handcuffs in view, the entire room shifted like a storm finally breaking. She looked around desperately, probably expecting somebody to defend her, but nobody moved. Not one person. The reporters captured every second of it. Her brother Gregory got arrested 2 days later trying to transfer money between shell accounts. By the time the investigation finished, over $400,000 had been tied to fraudulent contracts and diverted HOA funds. The craziest part? Briar Glen actually became a better neighborhood almost immediately after she was gone. Funny how peace returns once fear leaves the room. The new board dissolved most of the violation policies, opened financial records publicly, and capped HOA authority so no future president could hold that much unchecked power again. Mrs. Price kept her birdbath. Devin and Alicia stayed in their home and had their first baby the following spring. Caleb helped me finish the workshop behind my house, and some nights we'd sit out there drinking beer while the smell of cedar drifted through the air and neighbors laughed somewhere down the block. Real laughter this time, not that tense, polite, suburban kind. Sometimes I still think about Marjorie, honestly, not with hatred, more like caution, because power does strange things to lonely people. Give somebody unchecked authority long enough. Eventually they stop seeing neighbors as human beings and start seeing them as pieces on a board they own. And the truth is, communities only stay healthy when ordinary people are willing to speak up before things rot too far from the inside. So now I want to ask you something. If you found out your HOA was quietly targeting residents, abusing fines, and stealing money behind closed doors, would you fight back, or would you keep your head down and hope they never came after you next? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around for more real neighborhood drama where karma eventually catches up, even in gated communities.